But then I thought it'd be nice to have that balance out there for my children so they'll know who I am, what my thinking was, or why I did what I did. So it's a nice balance.
For decades, Diana Ross has been more than just a superstar. She's been an untouchable icon. The gowns, the glamour, the voice that defined a generation. But behind the flawless image was a silence that stretched across the years, a silence Diana herself carefully maintained. And now at 81, she's breaking it. Not for scandal, not for headlines, but for legacy. "I wanted my children to know who I really am," she explains. "Not just the performer the world cheered for, but the woman who made impossible choices, endured painful betrayals, and still kept moving forward." In an industry that often demands silence from women, especially Black women, Diana's decision to speak is more than catharsis, it's rebellion. After a lifetime of being told to smile and stay graceful, she's reclaiming her truth with no apologies. This isn't just about airing old feuds or naming names. It's about setting the record straight for her family, her fans, and perhaps most importantly, for herself. Diana Ross has lived through the highs of chart-topping fame and the lows of backroom politics. She knows what it means to stand on stage while quietly falling apart behind the scenes. And now, she's ready to let us in. The timing isn't accidental. She's lived a full life, one filled with melodies, memories, and more than a few missteps. But silence, as she puts it, can become a cage, and Diana Ross has never been the kind of woman to stay locked away. This is her voice, her story, and her stage. And for the first time in a long time, she's singing it without holding back. Number 1. Mary Wilson, Sisterhood turned rivalry. It started like a fairy tale, 3 young women from Detroit chasing a dream, harmonizing their way into history. Diana Ross and Mary Wilson weren't just bandmates in the Supremes, they were more like sisters, connected by ambition, bonded by sound, and for a while unstoppable. But as the spotlight narrowed and success piled up, something else began to grow in the shadows. Resentment. At first, it was subtle. Mary felt sidelined, watching Diana take center stage again and again. And Diana? She felt the sting of whispers behind her back, the cold shoulder off stage, and a growing tension that no harmony could mask. Fame didn't just change their music, it rewired their friendship. What once felt like unity now cracked under the weight of ego, expectations, and industry pressure. The breaking point came in 1983. The Supremes' much-hyped reunion tour should have been a celebration. But behind the scenes, it was a battlefield in sequins. Mary began deliberately singing over Diana's leads, throwing shade in interviews, and even leaking private arguments to the press. To the audience, they smiled, but backstage, it was war. Diana, ever the professional, kept her chin high, but the wounds were real. Betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from someone who knew your dreams, she would later reflect. And maybe that's what hurts most about Mary Wilson. She wasn't just a rival, she was a friend turned stranger. Their shared legacy now came with scars, and Diana learned that even the sweetest harmonies can sour. The Supremes may have made history together, but off-stage, their sisterhood fell silent. A silence that, decades later, still echoes in Diana's voice when she speaks her truth. Number 2. Aretha Franklin, a silent rivalry with soul. On paper, they were royalty, Diana Ross, the queen of Motown, and Aretha Franklin, the queen of soul. 2 powerhouses, 2 legends, 2 voices that defined generations. But when these 2 icons crossed paths, it wasn't music that filled the room, it was tension. Unlike other feuds, this one was quiet, calculated, and cold. No public blow-ups, no televised drama. Instead, it played out in side glances, subtle jabs, and unspoken competition. Every time they shared a stage or a red carpet, the energy shifted. Diana noticed it. The press noticed it. And Aretha? She orchestrated it. Aretha would show up late to industry events where Diana had already taken the spotlight, demand longer set times, or request bigger dressing rooms, power moves, but never direct confrontations. At first, Diana brushed it off. But over time, it became clear. Aretha wasn't just commanding respect, she was challenging Diana's throne. And then came the interviews. One moment still lingers in Diana's memory. After a joint award show appearance, Aretha smiled sweetly and told a reporter, "Some singers entertain, others elevate." She never said Diana's name, but everyone knew who she meant. That one sentence cut deeper than a diss track. The rivalry was never just personal, it was symbolic. In a music world that only left room for one black female icon at a time, both women were forced into a silent duel. Diana had hoped for solidarity. What she got was shade. Still, Diana never fired back. She never clapped back in interviews or stooped to gossip. But now, years later, she's naming the pain for what it was. Because the truth is, even queens can get tired of pretending the palace is peaceful. And when the crown feels threatened, the silence can be louder than any song. Number 3. Marvin Gaye, the duet that never was. It could have been magic. Diana Ross and Marvin Gaye, two Motown legends, each with a voice that could stop time. The chemistry was there, the admiration was mutual, and for a moment it looked like a collaboration was inevitable. They flirted with the idea of a duet album, the kind of record that rewrites history. But what should have been a soulful union became a moment Diana would carry like a bruise. It happened one late night in Los Angeles, in a studio filled with haze, tension, and too many expectations. A small disagreement over phrasing spiraled out of control. Marvin, already deep in his own battles, addiction, grief, and an inner storm he couldn't contain, lashed out. He looked at Diana, the woman the world called a queen, and snapped, "You're just a pretty puppet." Diana froze. The words weren't just cruel, they were a betrayal. Coming from anyone else, she might have brushed it off. But Marvin? He knew what it meant to survive in this industry. He knew the pressure, the pain, the loneliness that fame often hides. His words didn't just sting, they shattered something. She left the session in tears, mascara smudged, her heart heavier than any award she'd ever won. They never recorded together again. In public, Diana stayed gracious. She praised Marvin at tributes, smiled for the cameras, and kept her pain tucked beneath layers of poise. But in private, the wound lingered. Not just because of what he said, but because of what was lost. The dream, the potential, the moment that could have been legendary. Years later, she mourned Marvin Gaye. The artist, the soul, the troubled genius. But that night in the studio never left her. It wasn't just a falling out. It was a moment that echoed louder than any duet ever could. Number 4, Quincy Jones. When Diana Ross walked into that first meeting with Quincy Jones in the late 1980s, she wasn't just hopeful, she was ready for a new chapter. Quincy was the kingmaker, the genius behind era-defining sounds, and Diana saw in him a chance to evolve without letting go of her Motown roots. What she didn't see coming was the slow dismantling of everything she had built. From the very start, the energy was off. Quincy didn't treat her like an icon. He treated her like a project. In the studio, he interrupted her ideas, rolled his eyes mid-sentence, and pushed for a funk-heavy direction that felt worlds away from the polished soul that had made her a legend. And then came the line that still echoes in her memory. "You've got to forget that Motown stuff. It's dated." It wasn't just creative feedback, it felt like a eulogy, like Quincy was trying to bury the very legacy she'd spent decades building. When Diana tried to push back, to hold on to the artistry that defined her, Quincy didn't argue, he retaliated. He whispered to executives that she was too difficult. Calls stopped, sessions were canceled, opportunities evaporated like smoke. For Diana, this wasn't just professional sabotage, it was deeply personal. She had walked into that partnership with trust, believing she'd be seen as an equal. Instead, she left feeling like a relic in someone else's remix. What stung wasn't just the silence that followed. It was the realization that even the most respected collaborators could try to erase her essence in the name of reinvention. And so, Diana stepped away, not just from Quincy, but from anyone who saw her legacy as a limitation. Because reinvention should never come at the cost of your soul. Number 5, Rick James. If Diana Ross was elegance personified, then Rick James was chaos in platform boots. They couldn't have been more different. She was silk and grace. He was leather and rebellion. Still, both carried the Motown name, and for a while, Diana thought that meant solidarity. What she didn't expect was to become the target of Rick's simmering resentment. Their paths crossed often, Award shows, label events, industry mixers. But behind every smile Rick offered, there was something sharp hiding underneath. He mocked her in private, calling her plastic, out of touch, a relic from a prettier, more polished era. And while Diana brushed off the whispers at first, the truth came crashing down in the early 1980s. It was a Motown anniversary gala, an event meant to celebrate legacy. Diana had just wrapped a glowing performance, the crowd still buzzing, when Rick, scheduled to perform next, threw a full-blown tantrum backstage. He accused her of stealing his spotlight, refused to take the stage, and nearly derailed the show. Staff had to intervene just to keep the night from collapsing. But that wasn't the worst of it. Behind the scenes, Diana discovered that Rick had been quietly sabotaging her future, blocking her from working with producers he considered his protégés, killing off collaborations before they ever got started. The intent wasn't just professional, it was personal. He wanted her out of the way. What made it so painful wasn't just the betrayal, it was the fact that Rick could have been an ally, a fellow Motown titan in an industry that rarely uplifted black artists equally. But instead of building a bridge, he burned it. From that day forward, Diana made it clear, no more second chances, no shared stages, no shared songs. When someone chooses destruction over respect, you don't meet them halfway, you walk the other direction and never look back. Conclusion: the silence breaks. Diana Ross reclaims her voice. For decades, Diana Ross stood at the center of the spotlight, a symbol of glamour, talent, and grace. She smiled through press junkets, sparkled on red carpets, and accepted awards with that same poised elegance the world had come to expect. But behind that polished veneer, a deeper truth lived, a truth she carried in silence. Now, at 81, that silence has cracked wide open. This isn't a tell-all, it's a reclaiming. Diana isn't airing grudges or chasing sympathy. She's finally allowing herself the one thing fame never fully granted her: permission to be human. The betrayals, the rivalries, the heartbreaks, they weren't just chapters in a career. They were battles she fought quietly, beneath a crown too heavy to set down. She had been told for so long to be the bigger person, to rise above, to never let the mask slip. And she did, beautifully. But masks, no matter how dazzling, eventually suffocate. And Diana's was becoming a cage of her own making. So, she chose truth. Not just for herself, but for her children. For the fans who only knew the headlines. For every woman told to smile while being torn apart behind the scenes. Each name she spoke wasn't an attack, it was an act of release. Each story shared was a step toward freedom. And now when she steps on stage, it's not just to entertain, it's to stand in her full, unedited power.